FIDE and Aegon were supposed to have an announcement about the World Championship location by November 2015. Time's ticking. The TCE Superfinal still underway, and Grandmaster Robert Hess and I still have all the breakdowns. But we start off with the most surprising thing of the week, which wasn't Russia's dominating performance, but a selfie stick? It's ChessCenter. It's the only place you need to be right here, right now. Let's get going. Well, we start off this week's ChessCenter with several surprises coming out of the end of the European Team Chess Championships. Perhaps none more surprising than the fact that Alexander Grishuk owns a selfie stick, Robert. Robert, do you own a selfie stick?
Danny, I absolutely do not own a selfie stick, but I'm not surprised that Grishuk does. He's quite the comedian.
Yeah, well, as everyone can see from that image, he snuck on stage to take a selfie with the Russian women's team as they took first. But let's talk about the real surprise of the week, not the selfie stick. We're surprised that Team Russia, being favored, actually took care of the job. They have failed in several of the European Team Championships and World Teams and the Olympiads in the most recent memory. But they really took it home. Is this the sign of the Soviet chess school back on the rise, or are they just finally getting the job done?
You know, it really might be them getting back on track, Danny. And I think a problem in the past has been that they're competing as teammates, but they're really competitors against each other because their ratings often are so close that for invitations to top events, they want to win their matches 2.5, 1.5 with these other 27, 50-plus players losing. But it seemed like this was just the right time for them. They were playing in sync, and they played extremely well and deserved to win the gold medal.
Well, we're going to make some other notes before we let the surprise of the week go. We're going to say that also a sub-note surprise, in addition to Russia taking care of business, was that Viktor Bologun won individual gold. And I think if you were going to pick anybody to take the top gold there, Bologun wouldn't have been on the top of your list. And what do you see about his performance that surprised you the most?
Well, he's a very volatile player. He was up over like 27-30 a year and a half ago. But, you know, he also is just playing very good chess. He was a recipient of some good fortune, as you'll see in the Blunder of the week. But he's just playing excellent chess, and he led his team to a very strong showing.
Yeah, well, we're going to take a look at that Blunder of the week later on for those of you who don't know which game Robert just foreshadowed. And also, before we let everyone go, we should mention that a pleasant surprise was coming from Team Ukraine as the women's world champion Maria Muzichuk played like a true champ and cruised to the individual gold. And you can see a picture of her right here winning that gold. And we could say congratulations to everyone from the European Team Championships and move on. Well, not quite as an extensive an update needed from the TCE Superfinal this week, Robert. As everyone can see here from the standings, we've only had one more decisive game, Komodo taking game 72 and pushing his lead to a 4-game one. You predicted it would be about a 5-game lead, so you're pretty much right on track, Robert. As we switch over to check out the critical moment from game 72, now that you've had a chance to play Komodo in your own man versus machine material odds match, any thoughts on the experience of going up against the Dragon?
Komodo just knows where the pieces belong, Danny, and that's really what is, you know, mind-boggling to us humans. We are not always sure where the pieces' best squares are. But here, in this game against Stockfish thought the game was equal, but Komodo played the beautiful knight f4. Danny, I mean, why can't Stockfish get this right?
I don't even know, but you said it well when you said Komodo just knows where his pieces belong, and it always seems like things are equal until his pieces are just all placed better than yours. Right now, the rook on the f-file prepares the idea that as soon as white captures on f4, the g-pawn will take, and here comes f3 with both an attack and winning back the material. I look at this position, Robert, and it's funny. I mean, I'm not saying that either one of us could get this position against Stockfish straight up, but to me, knight f4 is not that hard of a move to find when you look at it. I mean, it's a fork of the queen and bishop. It makes sense for black's position, and this tactic of driving the g-pawn, now an f-pawn, won't be that hard, but for some reason, Stockfish is either still falling in love with other aspects of the position that Komodo doesn't over-evaluate, whether it's the bishop pair, as I've talked about before, or as you said, just when the critical moment comes, Komodo's pieces are just better. After queen to d1, he gobbled up the light square bishop, and the attack was on, right? He played knight f3, and before we knew it, this knight was anchored into f3 with the g-pawn, which everyone should watch out for, because we're going to get to a position down the road in this game that shows that knight to be the beast of the whole position. I'm gonna blitz through the next few moves, Robert, and I wanted to get to this moment where the bishop for the knight is something that really favored black here. Maybe you could talk a little bit to the viewers about why it's so dominant for the knight here, even though it is kind of an open position. There are pawns on both sides of the board, factors that superficially might help the bishop. But what can they learn from this about knowing how dominant the knight is here?
Yeah, the dominant knight on f3 is an outpost square. There's no pawn that can kick it out. The bishop on d4 looks beautiful because there's no black fianchetto bishop to counter it. But unfortunately for white, the e4 pawn, the light square diagonal, is very vulnerable. Not to mention that the knight covers a lot of vital squares from f3. And black always is the option of e5 itself, and that shuts that bishop down forever. The knight on f3 just really is taking control of so many vital squares that the knight just dominates the white bishop.
Well, and you highlighted it well when you said the e4 pawn and the light squares, almost like you've seen the game before. Maybe not, though. Maybe you're just that good, right? But, of course, Komodo did play queen to b7, and after a series of the next few moves, again, it still seems relatively equal, but Stockfish is kind of hanging by a thread. Komodo's going to start gobbling up pawns, and as the position and the smoke clears, as they say, we get to an endgame where the knight is so much better than the bishop because the white king remains in a mating net. And I want to get to one final critical moment that really highlights this for the viewers when the knight goes to d2, coming into f3. I don't care about the h6 pawn, Robert. As Bob Barker once said, I don't want a piece, I want the whole thing. And eventually it was enough for Komodo to win this game with a mating net. Here comes the e-pawn. And with the threat of e3, now the idea of rook e1 check and rook g1 mate was unstoppable. How does it feel to go up against Komodo in these scenarios? I'll tell you, it doesn't feel good.
Absolutely not, Danny, and Komodo showed why it's the boss.
Yep. A few more moves, gave up a piece, but hey, what the heck? At this point, it's just a matter of technique, and even a good lizard dragon is like a good Russian schoolboy. He's got technique. He's got the whole package, and there we go. That's our TCE final update. Let's show the standings one more time here. As I said, that we have a 4-game lead for the beast, the dragon. I don't expect much to change, and be interested to see what kind of updates we have in the final segment of the TCE Superfinal, which will be in next week's Chess Center. Of course, joining us now back in his hometown of Amsterdam is our own Director of Content, Peter Dockers, who provided the on-site video production and news reports for the European Team Championships. Peter, how is it to be home, and how was the trip?
Hi, Danny. Yeah, I'm back in Amsterdam after enjoying 2 weeks in wonderful Reykjavik. I must say, the Icelandic capital has become one of my favorite chess hotspots. I once did a very special interview there with Garry Kasparov, right next to the grave of Bobby Fischer.
Remember that.
Yeah, the connection with Fischer was also there at the European Team Championship. It was held in the same venue as the match of the century in 1972. And here's Peter Svidler in a clip. He talks about the match and Bobby Fischer.
And is it nice to play in the same hall where this match went on?
Yeah, that is a very
additional factor.
Very nice chance to sort of not participate in history, but sort of get close to an incredibly important event in the history of chess. Because I think without that match, the problems we've had over the past 10 years winning team events would not have happened, because I think chess would not have boomed in the West without Fischer Spassky. Sure.
That was Peter Svidler talking with Simon Williams, one of the commentators of the Chess.com live broadcast, which we produced during the event. Next to Simon was Evgeny Tomaszewski, another team member of the winning Russian team, because it was Russia who finally won a team event. They scored the gold medal in the open section with 15 match points and lost just 2 individual games.
Amazing.
So it was really a team effort. Here is Yevgeny describing how this came about.
But okay, I think the key moment was that all members of our team at some moments played our best chess at some moments. So and that's why we won. So all 5 players contributed something nice, and it was the key moment, I think, in general.
The professor.
Also in the women's section, Russia won gold with no less than 17 out of a possible 18 match points. Only Ukraine, who won the silver medals, managed to tie 2-2 with the Russian ladies. Ukraine had on top board world champion Maria Muzichuk playing, and she did wonderfully. She scored 7 out of 8, and that was of course good for the individual gold medal on board 1. In the open section, it was Victor Bologan who scored the best on board 1.
Yeah, an amazing performance by Bologan. Congratulations to both the Russian teams, and thank you, Peter, for all the reports.
Okay, thanks, Danny. See you next week.
Jumping back to last week's challenge that we gave the viewers, Sean, we see this hilariously awesome Photoshop tweet of the legendary Mikhail Tal sitting on the throne of Game of Thrones. Obviously, MCT Mike won the prize and got a lot of people involved in the conversation. But I have a question, Sean. Is this realistic? Would Tal have fit in the Game of Thrones genre community? Was it where would he be in that place?
Oh goodness, yes. There's probably no chess player that fits better in that universe. His unchecked aggression is definitely par for the course. You can tell from the smoke coming out of his mouth there that he's certainly a Targaryen. And, I could see him taking over some countries in Westeros and maybe getting together with Daenerys to take over the world.
Wow. A little bit of love interest maybe along the way. Well, we thought it was hilarious to see Tal in this photoshopped picture, but we move on to this week's social channel chatter. Everyone is talking about the chesspersonality.com quiz and contest we have on the homepage of Chess.com. If you haven't seen the videos yet, both Hikaru Nakamura and I and John Bartholomew, several people have already taken the test. We challenge everybody else to do it themselves, and we asked Sean, what would you be, a barbarian or maybe a grinder? Can't quite picture it.
I definitely see myself as the barbarian. About in the mid-game, I always try to rip open the king's side or die trying, so I feel that that's really closer to my roots.
Yeah, I can envision the Viking helmet and the long blonde braids right now, but I ended up being a grinder, so I don't know if the test needs updating. I don't know that I really consider myself a grinder, but still, we encourage everyone, check out the videos. Send us your video, either via Twitter or in the comments of the article, and the most interesting, fun video will win a 1-year diamond membership. That's right, that's a lot of diamonds, and they are a girl's best friend. So get your game on, take the test, watch the videos, and have some fun, and we will look for your videos soon. With so many updates in this week's Chess Center coming from the European Team Chess Championships, Robert, the blunder of the week also had to come from that tournament in the last round when Sir Chucky himself just wasn't himself in the early morning round, had to wake up maybe a little bit before his normal beauty rest allows, and he blundered in this position. Why don't you tell everybody what he did and why it was such a horrific move?
Yeah, when Ivanchuk is at his best, he's like Chucky the serial-killing doll. You have no chance against him. Unfortunately, in Iceland in the early round, he wasn't up to snuff here. He went bishop d8, a huge blunder because knight d4 allows pressure on the c6 knight. The queen on g2 pins that knight to the queen on a8, and there's no way to protect it. You simply lose a piece. So instead, a simple move like bishop to e7, it seems counterintuitive. The rook on e8 is now blocked by the bishop, but importantly, the queen on a8 is still protected by the rook on e8. It allows everything to be relatively neutral. Sure, white is slightly better, but you're not blundering a piece.
Yeah, well said, and I wonder if that's exactly what it was, just an early morning, quick, intuitive thought. He says, hey, I don't want to block my rook on e8, I'm going to play bishop d8, and, well, after knight to d4, he instantly regretted that dysfunction he created on his back rank, and interesting stuff. Chucky, you get the blunder of the week this week, but we know you will turn it around. And as we jump over to other news and welcome FIDE Master Mike Klein, I first have to ask, what's the deal with the pillow?
Never travel without my Charlotte pillow, Danny. Let's get back to the news. Ilya Morenzin of Aegon has said by the end of November, we're going to have an answer to the long-standing question, where is the next World Championship match going to be? In a letter to FIDE in September, he said it was going to be in New York, Los Angeles, or San Francisco. He said the prize fund was going to be 2 million euros, but that the announcement would be made by the end of this month, and we are running out of days here. So he's trying to line up some sponsorships with ESPN and other big-time networks, and he's waiting approval by the FIDE board. So it may not be Aegon we're waiting on FIDE, but we still don't have an answer, Danny.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, if they can attract big-time sponsors like they claim, then of course everyone's willing to wait, but time is ticking and you never can tell with FIDE. I understand the World Senior Championship just came to a close. What details do you have for us on that?
And that took place in Italy, and a couple names from the past ended up winning some world championships here. Bosnian Grandmaster Predrag Nikolic won the men's title for 50 and over. He won with 9.5 out of 11 points, really good result. And another name from even further back in the past, former women's world champion Nona Gaprindashvili won the women's 65 and over event. Good to see her still playing chess so well at an advanced age.
Gaprindashvili, say that 5 times fast. The U.S. Chess League finals are coming at the start of December. Who are the teams in the finals? Haven't followed it that closely this season, and what should we expect?
The St. Louis Archbishops are back. They're looking to defend their title. Not too many U.S. Chess League teams have been able to, although it has happened in the past. And they're going to play against the Manhattan Applesauce. That match is Tuesday, December 1st at 8 p.m. And that's going to be a great thing to watch in between the two Title Tuesdays. So you could watch the first Title Tuesday on Chess.com/TV, go watch the U.S. Chess League finals, and then come back and watch the second Title Tuesday event. And you guys have a busy Tuesday evening.
Well, you just described a perfect Tuesday in my mind, and you had a perfect segment. Mike, thank you again for joining us in Other News, and I will see you under time trouble.
See you in a bit.
Not all blunders in games from the European Team Championships this week, Robert. We also had some brilliance in the last round, particularly by one Pavel Elyanov, who everyone knows was the star at the World Cup, or at least sort of the surprise performance. In this position, he's forced to make a queen trade, it seems, with a skewer to the queen and the rook, or make a really passive move like queen f8, and head to an endgame down a bunch of pawns. But Pavel didn't exactly see it the same way, did he?
Absolutely not, Danny. He decided to surprise us all with the exclam, queen takes d3, as you would say, exclamaviach. And
Right.
the idea is that it looks like you're just hanging your rook on b8, but after queen takes b8 check, king h7, now how does white deal with all these threats? Queen takes h3, queen f3 check, queen takes b1 is of course a threat, maybe queen to d1, depending on where you move your rook. And white tried rook g1 here, but no, I'm not going to take on g1, which looks like a normal move. Instead, the fabulous move bishop d6, and Elyanov smelled checkmate. And he said, if you move your queen, keep that on the board. Queen h3 is coming in with mate. So white was forced to sacrifice on d6 here. And after queen takes d6 in return, well, Danny, it just looks like too much to overcome. That pawn on e2 seems to settle the issue.
Yeah, you said it well, and a few more moves showed that the pawn on e2, combined with some of the dysfunction of white's king still being open, was just not going to be enough. Not enough resources for white to hold this. And backing up to the beautiful moment, it's really hard to find moves like this when you're giving up a piece with check, right? Everybody makes sacrifices when it's comfortable for them, but giving up a piece with check might cause you to dismiss a move like that, right, in a normal game. But Elyanov saw the bigger picture. He saw that white had too many issues to deal with, and that the tempo move bishop d6 would be enough to close the deal. And well, he took our move of the week this week and continues to show that his career is on track here. As the eyes of the chess world shift to London in the coming weeks, we ask ourselves a question. Did Magnus Carlsen's win in the last round of the European Team Championships against Radoslav Wojtaszek right the ship, or is this not big enough to sell us on the fact that Magnus's train might finally be on the tracks? Sean, what say you?
Well, I think it's definitely enough to stop the bleeding. This was no run-of-the-mill grandmaster. This is someone at 2750, so it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to call him a super grandmaster. I think with a guy like Magnus, it's really about his passion and focus, and not anything like a specific problem that he might be having. So I do feel that it's only going to take one win to knock him back into the winner's circle, to knock him back into shape and good form, and this may well have been that win.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think with a guy like that, or at least almost all the guys of the World Elite, to return to form is much more about focus and execution, and not always a problem of X's and O's. So you might have me sold on that point. I guess time will tell. We're going to remind everybody to make sure they mark their calendars for Chess TV as the Chess Bras, Grandmasters Eric Hansen and Robin Van Kampen, get set for a full 1 hour to 90-minute prediction show as they break down all the matchups for the climax of the Grand Chess Tour in London. Will it be Topalov? Will it be Nakamura? Will it be Magnus getting the ship righted? Time will tell, and Sean and I will eagerly await the results, just like all of you. Mike Klein, the clock is a-ticking, and you are up first, my friend.
Nigel Short just had a great king walk against Essen. Which was better, that one or his famous one against Timon?
Dude, don't even ask me that question. Short Timon is still one of the greatest games of all time. Now, MVL has just re-entered the top 10 in the world. Is he the strongest player who will not be competing in the upcoming Candidates Tournament in March?
Yeah, for my money, it's either him or Kramnik. We have the next Title Tuesday coming up on December 1st. What's the over-under on the number of Grandmasters playing?
I'll set it at about 45. I have a question. Is Richard Raporbach, the young Hungarian star, seems to be on the rise again? Well, is this going to continue?
Yeah, I just talked to him when he was in Malta. He's getting more comfortable at his new home in Serbia. I think he's back. Now, Russia just had some great success at the European Team Championships. Can they put it together and win some gold medals at the Olympiad?
They're too strong not to be the favorite every year in and year out, Mike. Whether they can do it or not, time will tell. Finally, I have to say, everyone predicted Magnus Carlsen would eventually cross 2,900. Now he might fall under 2,800. Which do you think is more likely?
I just can't see him falling below 2,800. I know 2,900 is super unlikely, but my money's still there.
All right, well, time will tell with that, and you are out of time, my friend. Thanks for doing Time Trouble again, and we'll see everybody on next week's Chess Center.